What is up, Insaners, and welcome to another video of the Fantasy Premier League 2022-23 season. In this one, we'll be covering the top 10 tips to have a great FPL season. Guys, make sure that you give this video a thumbs up if you like what you see today. You can also subscribe to the channel to catch up on all the preseason content and have a strong start to the season. Guys, we'll start off with the first tip: avoid early transfers. Now, transfers are very important in the FPL game, guys, since each can cost you 4 points. Now, I think in each game week, managers do fall into that trap where they're trying to force out certain players by taking multiple hits without properly analyzing the transfer and its effects. Now, with each transfer, guys, you should ask a couple of questions to yourself in terms of why you're making this transfer, how will this transfer help your team, and will this transfer or will this particular player outscore the player that you're taking out over a set number of fixtures. Now, for me, it's generally about 4 game weeks. It could be different for you. Now, this year, we probably have to play the game in a slightly different way, considering that we have the World Cup and we have that additional wildcard. Whatever the case may be, guys, a simple analysis of all these questions that should help your decision-making process and actually value every transfer. With that, we come to the second point, the second tip: be open about defensive options. As this year, it could be a bit different. In fact, last year we saw something similar where we saw a lot of teams, lot of managers, in fact a lot of FPL players, especially defenders, doing really well. That's how the Premier League has become, guys. There are a lot of teams who employ attacking football, who have all these fullbacks and wingbacks, and they play in very attacking positions, providing attacking returns as well as defensive stability. When I'm talking about this, guys, I'm generally talking about the top teams who have a lot of attacking defenders in their squad. Now, one very important thing to note here is that, guys, defensive options like, let's say, for example, Cancelo, maybe Trent, even Reece James, these could be a lot better than midfielders and forwards in that same price range. So you have to take that call in terms of which player would do better. Would you want a forward who's about 7.5 million as opposed to a Trent who could be very attacking and also give you defensive clean sheet points? In this year's game, guys, generally there are a lot of good defender options, good defenders that you can choose from. So just be open to the idea of going a little bit heavy in defense in general. It's absolutely okay, guys, if you have a different strategy, but I'm just saying you should not be rigid and just entertain that thought of maybe having to invest a little bit more money in defense. Let's move on to the third tip, guys. Avoid promoted teams at the start. Like every year, this year as well, guys, we have 3 promoted teams. It's Fulham, Nottingham Forest and Bournemouth. Now, generally there are a lot of options from these promoted teams who are cheap in price, and we generally get enticed by them to fill our teams. Of course, we can still find budget enablers, cheaper options, whether it's defenders, etc., to fill into our teams, but I think it's probably best to avoid them at the start. Now, one reason that I'm saying this is because most of the teams this year have tough fixtures, and you can actually attack the other teams, maybe the top 6 teams, maybe mid-table teams, and probably gain an advantage there. It's always a good idea to see these teams at the start in terms of which players are doing well or which are probably an avoid for your team, and then make a move. With that, guys, we come to our next point. Information is key. I think the goal of FPL is to make the best possible decision with the information that we have available at the time. Of course, guys, information can come in different ways. You can have press conferences, you can have training photos. There are a lot of reliable Twitter accounts that you can follow. Another is probably waiting until the midweek games finish and get more insights, get more data, get more information. And the last one is, of course, you can follow different FPL data models that are available. Now, what I did last season was, guys, that I made my transfers at the last minute because I wanted to gather as much information as possible before the deadline. Now, sometimes that might mean that you might lose certain amount in team value, but I think information is more important than team value at a particular stage. I honestly believe that if you want to do well, you should fully invest in gathering as much as information as possible for each game week before making any moves. Let's move on to the next one. Use a mix of eye test and stats. Guys, whatever I've seen over the years that I've played FPL, the community seems to be very divided in terms of what to prefer, the eye test or statistics to analyze your transfers. I can say this with some degree of experience, guys, that managers who are generally looking at a top rank finish, they try to develop a hybrid model of both where they follow eye tests as well as statistics. Now, guys, the eye test helps people in consuming as much as football as possible and trying to add to their research in terms of what they saw in the live game or highlights. Statistics, on the other hand, they provide easy data to identify undervalued assets, predict form, and maybe even interpret football matches. In my opinion, guys, managers who can find the perfect balance between watching as much football as possible and probably using data as well throughout the season, they'll find themselves closer to their goals. Let's talk about the next point. Don't react without thinking. I think managers tend to be a little bit reactive in terms of FPL, which leads to bad decisions. I've seen a lot of people reacting, especially early in the season when there's less information on players. There's one common phenomena that you'll always see, that whenever a player scores a goal or maybe does well in a particular game, a lot of transfers, a lot of managers, they try to bring that player in the immediate week. Now that might not be the best solution or the best approach in most times, guys. They might not perform the same way as last week, guys, and you might end up getting stuck with a player that you probably would want to take out the next week. I've also seen a lot of people taking hits for the same, and in my opinion, that's absolutely not the right strategy. Guys, my advice here would be to stay patient, do your own research, and trust yourself, and not chase the pack or chase the transfers, even chase people who are making those transfers. The next tip that we have is, guys, have faith in your process. Guys, FPL is a game that involves a mixture of skill and luck. I know there's a huge debate in terms of which one's more. A lot of times it might happen that your good decisions, they might not work out. For example, if a player is having great underlying stats and the upcoming fixtures are good, the player might not perform, might not give you attacking returns or defensive returns, and end up blanking in those games. Now in this case, guys, absolutely you didn't take a wrong decision, you just had an unlucky result, an unlucky match maybe, and you should probably just keep trusting your process. On the other hand, guys, if you're picking a player with bad underlying stats and maybe okay or great fixtures just because of a feeling, I don't think so that's the best approach to go for. It's really important to understand how you've arrived at a particular decision, trust the process if at all it works for you, and not quickly get discouraged if you're not getting the right returns. The next point and the next tip, guys, is nailing captaincy is key. Now, captaincy is one of the most crucial decisions that you make each game week, and that can really make or break your game week and your season. There are different approaches in terms of captaincy. Of course, you can go for a safer pick who consistently gets FPL points rather than taking a huge punt. Personally for me, guys, I like to take some chances. I like to take a few more risks than the other players, but then that is just me. Your strategy can absolutely be different. I think there are always game weeks, guys, where you can be different in captaincy. Let's say, for example, a very high owned premium option like a Salah, he might have a very tough game and you might not want to captain him that match. In terms of captaincy, guys, I always think that you should have some sort of a matrix, some sort of a plan for who to captain the next 3 to 4 game weeks. Now how this helps, guys, if in 3 game weeks you do not have the best captain that particular week, you can plan your transfers accordingly. I think it's a very simple strategy. You should have some sort of thinking ahead in terms of a captainable options and try to get them as soon as possible in your FPL team. Now let's come to the next point. Balance out being aggressive and defensive. The FPL season is very long, guys, and with limited transfers, chips, double game weeks and planned game weeks, managers should know when to be aggressive and defensive. I think the game weeks to be aggressive are the ones in which you are using a chip, probably there's a double game week, or the top captaincy option has a tough fixture. In these situations, guys, do not be afraid to make high upside transfers and pick a differential consistent captain. On the other hand, guys, the game weeks to be defensive are the ones in which you're not set up well in a blank or a double game week, probably you're not using a chip when the other managers are, or you do not have the best captaincy option. In these situations, guys, managers probably have to accept it and kind of do damage limitation, such as taking a hit for a top captaincy option or bringing in multiple double game week or blank game week players. With that, guys, we come to our final tip: be flexible and adaptable. I think the best managers are the ones that are flexible and they adapt quickly to constant changes throughout the FPL season. I've seen a lot of people making mistakes like being too stubborn, having certain biases against a particular player, maybe a team, because they hurt you before, or maybe you don't like that club or player at all. I think this particular thinking will definitely hurt you in the long run, and this should be avoided. I saw last season a lot of managers, they failed to adapt and be flexible with the amount of double game weeks, postponements, and COVID uncertainty, leading to very disappointing seasons. Guys, the reality is that no season is the same, so the more flexible you are, the quicker you adapt to the changes throughout the season, the better you'll end up doing. So what are some of your best pointers to start the season strongly? Do let me know in the comments below. That'll be all from my side, guys. Do smash that like button if you enjoyed today's video. please do subscribe to the channel as well for more preseason content. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in Saners next time.